Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Adweek Together. My name is Ronan Shields. I am Adweek's programmatic editor, and I'm joined today by Nicolas Bidon, who is the CEO of Xaxis, which is what could be termed as the programmatic arm of WPP. Nicolas, first of all,
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. You are joining us from London, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And it's coming towards the end of a beautiful afternoon here in London. Nice. With a nice and sunny day. And tomorrow is a bank holiday as well. So things are not all doom and gloom.
Oh yes, it's the first bank holiday of May. I lived in London for many years, so it's Nicolas and I have known each other for quite some time. Nicolas, how is lockdown in London compared to, say, New York?
Well, it's hard for me to compare because I'm only living it in London, yeah. Of course. But from what I gather, obviously we have teams in 47 different markets. London is one of our big markets. The US is our biggest, so we do have a lot of team members in New York. And from what I gather from them, I would say it's fairly similar. I think, restriction haven't been probably the strictest, either in New York or London, when you compare to other places like China in the early day of the crisis, or Italy or Spain, for instance. But nonetheless, I think we're going on week 8 in London. And I think on both sides of the Atlantic, everybody is starting to get jittery and eager for the lockdown to ease.
Yes. Well, with that, obviously, one thing that we all do now, almost across the globe in professions such as our own, is that there is a big work from home shift that every company, our companies included, are going through right now. How difficult a transition was that in an organization like Xaxis, and perhaps for some of the more uninitiated viewers of this session, maybe you could explain a little bit about what your sort of entry-level staff at Xaxis do day to day.
Sure. So Xaxis, our mission is to deliver better outcome from digital investments for our clients, and doing so by leveraging programmatic technology, which I think you refer to us as the programmatic specialist within WPP and Group M, and I think that's actually a very good description. So a lot of what our people do has to directly relate to programmatic stacks and data and technology. So things like working into a DSP, whether it's the Trade Desk, Xandr, DV360, or working with large data sets, to produce insight and analytics for our clients, or working with machine learning algorithm within Copilot, which is our proprietary tech. Now, the good news is all of these systems have one thing in common, which is they are based on a cloud architecture, and they have a UI which is web-based, so that you can access anywhere in the world with a web browser. So the technical side of the transition for Xaxis, when we started the lockdown all around the world, I would say has been working relatively smoothly, because besides maybe having to work on smaller screens, at least at first, and in less comfortable chairs, I would say 99% of what our people do every day is their key interface or tools is a solid internet connection and a web browser. So that part has been fairly okay. I think psychologically and mental health, and especially for some of our people who have young children at home, I think that has been a much more challenging part of this new way of working we've all had to adapt to.
Yeah, I can understand. Yeah, certainly the uncomfortable chairs is one part that I can empathize with. Incidentally, do you think that this working from home shift, do you think it will have a longer lasting impact? I sat in on a webinar just 2 weeks ago where Sir Martin Sorrell was talking about his prediction that maybe we might move to more flexible arrangements around office space. He cited WeWork as having the right idea. Maybe you could question the execution, but he said there was something with the idea. What's your thoughts on that, about this whole flexible working culture space issue? Do you think, is it a good thing for business because you could save a lot of money on real estate?
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's certainly a good thing, and I think it's here to stay. I think, at Xaxis, we've already experimented with this prior to the crisis. So if you look at our London office, we launched flexible working basically about, a year ago. And so what we mean by this is, so all of our EMEA HQ and Global HQ employees in London are actually using a shared office. It's not WeWork, but something similar. And when we spec the office, we used an occupancy rate of, I think, 60 or 70%, meaning, making sure we don't have more space than needed, taking into account the fact that, not everybody is expected into the office every day because of that flexible working framework we rolled out. And I think, it certainly worked for us when we did this a year ago. As I said, this was more as an experiment. It wasn't something that Xaxis is currently doing around all the offices and countries we have. But I think, one of the benefits of this crisis is it has demonstrated and shown, to various people around the world and around the group, that you can be extremely productive and efficient and innovative while still not being into an office from 9 to 5. And I think we have, I think the key in this is flexible, because I was referring to young parents, for instance. I think for them, their experience over the last 8 weeks has been very, very different. Having to juggle with homeschooling and toddlers, than, for instance, than it is for somebody like me. So I think there are people who are going to want or need, due to their own circumstances, or due to their role as well, depending on whether you are a trader working on data and tech stack, or if you are more of a client service person. I think there won't be one sort of source of truth in terms of what the right way of working is in the future. And so I do see flexible working being, maintained.
Here to stay. Yeah.
Absolutely here to stay, and it will deliver savings, to your point, because again, I think those occupancy rate that people are looking at will probably lower. When you scope an office, maybe in the future, you'll base it on a 50% occupancy rate as opposed to 80 or 90, as is the case right now.
Yeah, certainly. There's some interesting things ahead for real estate, both commercial and potential impact that could have on residential. But that's a complete aside from anything ad tech related. So obviously, these are some very difficult times. Ad spend across the board has dipped significantly. I have heard just today, I was listening to the BBC radio, and the Bank of England said that this coming quarter could see the worst economic transaction on record. They did say that there could be a very significant bounce back, classic V-shaped economic recovery, but nonetheless, a very, very deep V in the middle. Every holding group has made cutbacks recently. How WPP included, your own holding group, how has this affected Xaxis specifically?
Yeah, I think, in a very similar approach to, WPP, we first looked at how can we minimize the impact on our talent, because we all realize, and especially at Xaxis, that there is a war for talent, and that, the data scientists, the traders that are the future, I think, of the media space in general, are quite hard to recruit and quite hard to keep. So I think, we have looked at, first off, what can we do to minimize impact on people? We've all taken in the executive level salary sacrifice. We have suspended all discretionary spend, things like obviously travel and entertainment, marketing. We've paused some of our long-term investment in tech. So there's a lot of things we have done, but unfortunately, and this happened this week, so this is very fresh. We have had, from a Xaxis perspective, to talk about redundancy for certain roles. It's been very small in scale, low single-digit percentage, but we've had to do that, and we've tried to do this, in a way that mimics some of the reality we're facing. There's not going to be a lot of event marketing, for instance, going on this year, as an example, and also, more importantly, trying to not cut in places where we think it will be extremely important to be fully staffed, to be able to deliver the kind of service and results our clients expect when the recovery takes place. And we do certainly hope that it will be V-shaped, and that the bottom of the V won't last for too long. And I have to say, on that front, just to add a little bit of optimism into the doom and gloom a little bit that has been the last 8 weeks. One of the benefits of being a global business is we do see things happening in different part of the world at different rhythm. And I was looking at our China business and talking to some of our colleagues over there. And you look at sales of cars in China went literally within 4 months of being minus 80% in January to now actually growing in April. So in 4 months, they went from basically nothing to now back into year-on-year growth. And that's, whether or not it will be the same in the US or the UK or France or Italy, who knows? But I would say at least it's a positive sign, which I think we can rejoice about.
Sure. Yeah, I saw that those growth in Chinese car sales were confirmed today. So as you say, hopefully there are some green shoots of recovery will make themselves evident very soon. Okay, well, prior to the COVID crisis, Group M, of which Xaxis is part of, was making some interesting moves in terms of its supply side relationships, shall we say. I know what you can't speak for Group M wider as a whole, but
Mhm.
obviously you are a significant part of it. I was just interested if you could give us your take on things, both this article that I wrote, that I think that was February or maybe early March. Who knows? The concept of time has collapsed for me. Um,
Same for me.
but yeah, this was both Omnicom Media Group and Group M separately making some supply side operations, primarily, I believe, for well, to ensure transparency, which we'll get to later, and also just getting good rates, making yourselves attractive, both publishers and buyers. Could you talk us through this trend a little bit more, if nothing else?
Sure. I think, and maybe I'll link it. I don't know if you've seen ISBA in the UK recently, published the results of
I was going to
a
get to that at the
very,
end. Yes.
yeah. Well, we can start it now. But I think, a
Okay.
result of a study into the sort of supply chain
Yeah.
overall within the programmatic space, looking at both the buy side and the sell side. I think one of the clear, findings, which again for any practitioner is not a surprise, is how complex things have become.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you take again that supply side, back in the old days, it was literally a direct connection between the buy sides and individual media owners.
Yeah.
The ad tech revolution, because I think it was a revolution and still is to a certain extent, came in, I think, offered a lot of new capabilities for the buy side, but also created a wide variety of new intermediaries on the supply side. So different SSPs, different ad servers, different content verification systems, etc.
There was a
And I
lot.
think
Yeah.
that there are still a lot of people reselling inventory without necessarily like adding any significant value to that. There are still issues with fraud, issues with domain masking, people trying to portray themselves as inventory source that they aren't. And again, the industry, I think, is trying and has tried to address this with initiatives like ads.text, for instance, or other sort of innovation. But nonetheless, I think it's too complex, and it means that the value in the value chain gets cut out in too many pieces. And so, from a Group
Sure.
M perspective and Xaxis perspective, we are trying to reduce the complexity by basically establishing more direct relationship with the quality media owners, and really basically agreeing with them on the preferred route in a programmatic stack to their inventory. And by doing that, we ensure that we get the best price for our clients, and we also ensure we have the best brand safety and the best
Mm-hmm.
certainty of minimizing basically fraud and again bad actors in the system. So I think it's something not only Group M should be leading, but frankly all of the industry. And I think you will see consolidation and disappearance of bad actors in the next few years for sure.
Sure. For those of you who have dialed into this column, maybe not so au fait with what's been going on in the UK for the last couple of days, ISBA, which is the UK equivalent of the ANA, I think it would be fair to say, they conducted a 2-year report. They published their findings yesterday. We at Adweek, we did a quick write-up of it. We are going to follow that up with a more comprehensive coverage. I don't know if our producer is able to show a version of that story, looking at how publishers only receive half of online ad spend. That's it. Thank you very much. And yeah, it basically just goes to show that 50% of advertiser spend goes to intermediaries, let's just call them. Now, that's in and of itself, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But one of the kind of more interesting findings was that 15% of ad spend just went unaccounted for. There was no way to account for it. And this was PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the biggest auditing firms in the world, was just unable to find out where this money went. And I think there's probably going to be some big questions asked of the ad tech ecosystem. Nick, from your end, do you have any anticipation as to, could you help us say, quantify by how much you intend to reduce your supply chain by, let's just say over the next 12 months?
Well, I think we've already done so. So again, speaking on behalf of Xaxis and not on behalf of Group M, I mean, from a Xaxis perspective, we've had a very focused strategic initiative to do SPO in our core markets over the last 12 months. As a result of that, we have reduced quite significantly the number of sellers on Ad Exchange or SSP we work with, and tighten as well our whitelist in certain cases. So I would say that has already taken place. I think there is more work that needs to be done because, as I said, every media market is very local, and we are in 47 countries. So I think that process I just described is more advanced in certain markets than in others. So there's still a lot of work to continue to do. But just coming back to your question about ISBA and their findings, I think for me that really validates the approach we've been taking at Xaxis since 2017, so 3 years ago, which is to really focus on outcome, because again, it's become so complex in terms of all the different technology you need, all the different media access points you need, and type of talent, that rather than trying to stay on top of all the technical and regulatory developments, rather than having to deal with the kind of complexity of the supply chain we were just talking about, we wanted to refocus the conversations around the end product, right? The outcome. At the end of the day, if you basically, as an advertiser, can really measure adequately the value you get from every dollar you spend on advertising programmatically, so that return on ad spend, the question of where is the sort of money going in the value chain become less of a worry, because you do get the results. I think the challenge today for the industry is it's kind of caught between two worlds. One where there isn't that proactive necessarily approach around outcome and measurement of what drives real results, but yet there is still that opacity and that complexity that was illustrated by the ISBA report. And I think that is the pain point, and that's what we're trying to help our advertisers with, and why, frankly, we've seen a revival over the last 3 years of our business once we changed that conversation away from transparency and towards what should matter, which is results.
Yes, I can remember you and I spoke about this pivot to outcomes approximately a year ago, I'd say. That might be a little bit off in terms of timing, but I can remember some conversations I used to have with people that used to be quite senior at Xaxis, and they used to say that a lot of clients, brands, used to say, okay, we've got some questions about the transparency of your margins, and then there was an offering that you made where you can have full transparency or better performance. And in many cases, the client would go for better performance over 100% transparency in terms of the margins, etc. Would you say that is still? Would you say A, say that is a fair assessment, and B, would you say that is still the case? Because those are just conversations that I was having with some industry sources circa a year ago.
Yeah, I think that situation very much depends, also market by market. But I do think that, again, we have seen, much more willingness to work closely from advertisers and big brands to work closely with us on that outcome model. And essentially, it's quite simple, right? It's to say, first, how do you want to measure success, right? Which is today, and in the past, I think, we as an industry have imposed certain buying metrics, CPM, CPV, cost per view, cost per thousand, etc., cost per click. But we haven't really asked advertisers, like, how would you like to measure success of your digital investments? And that's the work we've done at Xaxis over the last 3 years with the most progressive of our advertisers. And I think once we've done that, again, the conversation changed, because everything we do on their behalf is to optimize towards the metric they have chosen, not the one that's imposed by a Facebook or by, you know, another sort of 15-year-old industry metric, but by the one they have chosen as reflective of the ROI they get from programmatic and digital. And I think when we've done that with clients like Ford, with clients like IKEA, etc., we've seen tremendous success. But it's not easy, because there are issues in terms of measurement. There are issues in terms of connecting the client data, you know, back into our prediction models, etc. So it is a journey. It's not as easy as, you know, somebody saying, okay, let's go this way, and then next day it's on. That's why, to answer your question, I would say it's still a work in progress, but we are extremely encouraged by the results we've seen over the last 3 years of working in that new way with advertisers. And I think there's been a pendulum swing. You look at, you know, there were clients like P&G as an example, Unilever, etc., who I think I've taken very public positions around, you know, transparency being the sacrosanct principle of everything they do. And I think what they meant by that is transparency of, again, results, not necessarily transparency of, you know, I want to know every little penny throughout the value chain. And we've made progress with those advertisers, which again, I think validates the model.
Sounds great. Nicolas, we are going a little bit over our time here, but related to your point, I know it's all good. It's been enjoyable. I actually sent out a bit of a message on my various social channels asking for any questions of yourself. And one of them was this, and it's quite pertinent because to the sort of the future demise of the third-party cookie, of which we at Adweek have reported on extensively over the last year, and it is something that affects every tier of the industry. But this is a question directly from a fan. That piece is about some of the current liquidity crisis that you can currently see on your screens, but it also takes in the problems posed by the cookies. But this is a question from a reader, Nicolas. So if you can just take the time to answer this, that would be great. Xaxis recently pivoted towards becoming an outcomes-based offering, but how were you able to scale this without third-party cookies, which are soon to go away in Chrome, which is the dominant web browser of the internet? So that's a question that some of our readers would like to hear your thoughts on.
Yep. So it's a complex question. If we're running out of time, it might be difficult, but I will give you an answer. But I think, and first off, by the way, I read your piece on, I think you call it the AdTech identity crisis, and it was, I thought, well researched and doing a good job of showing some of the, you know, both the issues at stake and some of the workarounds. I think you mentioned, you know, Google ADH or data clean rooms as one example of how in the future maybe we will be able, at least within the Google ecosystem, and that's an important distinction, you know, to measure and target and again, you know, basically measure the ROI and bring it back to outcomes. So I think it is complex. It is, you know, going to change the industry a lot. I think there is a willingness within the industry to solve it as an industry. So again, there's various working group, whether it's the IAB Tech Labs, whether it's you know, the W3C commission that is looking at that to solve it, and we are involved, both Xaxis, GroupM, and WPP in all of these, to make sure that we adequately represent our needs and the needs of our advertisers. But I think, you know, we have to come to a reality, which is at Xaxis, I remember, and I've been here for 8 years at Xaxis, and I remember, you know, 8 years ago, our vision was to say we're gonna be able to apply the same data across all of the formats and ecosystem to measure, again, the best ROI and give like a unified view of insights. And I remember we had this specific sites called Breaking Down the Wall, where we were like, we are gonna make sure we can measure and target the same way into Facebook, into Google, etc. I think you fast forward to today, I think that vision is absolutely obsolete. I think, both from a regulatory perspective, we can have different operating environments in different countries. Also, the walled gardens, I would say, have never been stronger, and the walls have never been higher. And on top of it, we have new ones, right? We have Amazon, we have, Xander, we have, a lot of new entrants in that space. So I think the game has changed. And from a Xaxis perspective, we want to keep our north of, applying machine learning, data science in unique ways to make connection between all of those dots and make sure we make the best decision to deliver whatever outcome the client wants. But it's not going to be an easy way. And the last point I would make is I don't think that approach is entirely linked to third-party cookies. I think we will be able, via machine learning and AI, and via also a better use of those different walled gardens data and first-party data from publishers or from tech vendors, to be able to still do this. So, it's not what prevents me to sleep at night. I'll say it like that.
Okay, great. Nicolas Bidon, thank you so much for joining us
Ronan.
today on Adweek Together. And have a great day and enjoy your bank holiday weekend in London.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, thank you for dialing in. I've been Ronan Shields on Adweek Together. On tomorrow's issue, my colleague Nick Gardner will be joined by Tammy Brooke, who is the CEO of talent agency FYI Brand Communications, and they're going to be talking about what they're doing for clients during these uncertain times. Thank you for dialing in, everybody, and have a great day.